Did you know that St. Luke's University Health Network has been recognized by the U.S. government as the highest performing health system in the United States for quality? You heard right. St. Luke's #1 recognition affirms our status as the top leader among the most respected healthcare providers in the nation, including Houston Methodist and the Mayo Clinic. To state it simply, if you want to receive the best care when you go to a hospital, come to St. Luke's.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Taxi!
Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
Miranda Devine is the best columnist, not just in New York with the New York Post, but I believe anywhere in the world today. And she's here on this Tuesday morning. Miranda, how are you?
I'm well, thank you, Sid. How are you?
I'm great. Any thoughts on the passing of Jesse Jackson?
Well, look, I guess, we're talking about his horrendous comments back in the 80s and his anti-Semitism, which seemed to be, although he apologised for his Hymietown comments, it seemed to be part of his makeup. But honestly, that looks so mild compared to today's so-called civil rights leaders, today's radical Democrats.
True.
And, so you can sort of almost look back at him in fondness, but also wonder where it all went so wrong. From Martin Luther King, he was a protege of Martin Luther King, and then the sort of Nation of Islam situation basically inserted itself into the black civil rights movement, and I don't think it really recovered after that.
That's all great points, all of those. Right, that was the Farrakhan, the National Islam, and never really recovered, but you're right, you look at the people today, and it is so much worse. I mean, I spent all day yesterday attacking Spike Lee. Spike Lee goes to Knicks games in New York City at Madison Square Garden. There's tons of Jews there. I could just imagine, Miranda, how many Jewish people funded Spike Lee movies, all those multi-million-dollar movies. I guarantee you a ton of Jews got involved in that. And this moron shows up at the NBA All-Star game wearing a shirt with the Palestinian flag and a purse with the Palestinian flag. He was so angry that there was an Israeli, this beautiful guy, his name is Denny Avdia, great player, Portland Trailblazers, deserved All-Star, Israeli. So instead of going to the game and wearing what he wears all the time, his stupid Knick gear, because there was an Israeli on the court, this scumbag, Spike Lee, sorry for the French there, Miranda, shows up dressed like he was coming from a Palestinian prom. I mean, come on.
And why? There's plenty of injustice in America that he could spend his time thinking about and protesting about. What is his connection with the whole Palestinian thing? Why? Apart from just being provocative and anti-Jewish. And it's a completely unnecessary kind of virtue signaling, but what it does show is Spike Lee is nothing if not fashionable, and that's what's fashionable in his circle.
That's another great point. Miranda Devine right here for the New York Post. That is fashionable in his circle. So you wrote a column that we loved. Marco Rubio delivers tough love to Europe, and the overgrown teenage brats know dad is right. And I think JD Vance is in town today. I think my man John Catsimatidis may be even having dinner with JD tonight. I don't know. But at any rate, I don't dislike JD, but for me, Marco Rubio is the guy. If you told me when Trump is done in 28, hey, Sid, who do you want to be president? No disrespect to JD. I would take JD over any Democrat. But honestly, my first choice happens to be Marco Rubio. And boy, Miranda, did he look presidential in that speech he made in Munich a couple of days ago, yes?
Yes, he certainly did. He looked like a real statesman. And, I said an American statesman was born on a German stage because it was a new Marco Rubio. It's the same Marco, but he's just evolved into this incredibly sure-footed, confident orator.
And by the way, I'm going to give you the reason for that, because I actually was in Miami back in 2010 when Marco was a young politician. I tell this story all the time. I was doing a sports show in Miami. I took my show one day to a beach bar in Fort Lauderdale, and on the air, I held a live debate. Charlie Crist, he was governor at the time, a guy named Kendrick Meeks, and a young politician named Marco Rubio in their battle for state senate, which Marco won. And Marco listened to me. I was on Sports Talk Radio because he's a huge sports fan, and his wife, his wife, Miami Dolphin cheerleader. Okay, so we go back. So Marco and I go back about 15 years. But you know why this Marco Rubio looks so much better? It's really a very simple answer. He's been around President Trump.
Yeah. Yes, and look, that's right. And you have to say the same thing for JD Vance. They're sort of apprentices at the foot of Donald Trump because, Donald Trump is unique in his abilities, his talents, his skills in communicating to the base, in understanding what this sort of new Republican Party is because he's formed it. And I think Marco's evolved a lot of his views, and I think JD Vance is doing the same thing. And look, Marco Rubio said exactly the same thing pretty much that JD Vance said a year ago to the same assembled group of European heads of state and intelligence chiefs and defence leaders, etc. But he said it in such a skillful way. And it just reminded me, when I was a little girl, I asked my father if Santa Claus exists. And he gave me this really great answer that satisfied me perfectly. Except afterwards I thought about it and I thought, I still don't know if Santa Claus exists.
That's funny.
So that's the skill of Marco Rubio. He basically punched them in the nose exactly the same way JD did, except he did it in such a warm and open and sort of, wasn't even polite. It was just generous and telling Europe how we owe everything to them, really. Like they're the basis of our culture, Western culture. And he wasn't scared to say Christian Western culture, which doesn't mean, we're not Judeo-Christian, etc. But he's talking about the roots of Western culture. And it was seen afterwards by the likes of the New York Times and AOC as being, bigoted and white-centric, and why would you talk about Christianity, and it's all about Western civilization. That's not the only civilization. Well, it's the most successful in human history. So I thought he was courageous and also incredibly skillful diplomatically. And I think it was deliberate. It's a bad cop, good cop. And JD did what needed to be done to soften them up and shock them. And I think that's what Donald Trump does as well, to say to Europe, hey, grow up, stand on your own 2 feet, pay your own way, stop relying on us for everything. And then Marco comes in with the nice routine afterwards, a year later, and says, look, everything Marco said was right, but we love you.
Right.
And we want to join together with our oldest friends and allies.
Yeah, you're right. That's the good cop, bad cop. That's exactly what it was. And then when you look back at a couple of days ago, the antithesis of Marco Rubio, the Democrats, Gavin Newsom, he's there. He's talking about climate change again, which, and I said this earlier to the great Congressman Mike Lawler, if Democrats believe that climate change is what they need to win to take the presidency back, then they're even dumber than they look. And they look really dumb because as bad as Newsom looked, have you ever seen anybody, and I mean this sincerely, not because I hate her, I barely know her. You ever see anybody look sillier than AOC in Munich a couple of days ago?
I mean, it's just so dumb. There's a fantastic piece that I just read saying, at least she's stupid. She's such a Marxist. She's so dangerous, but at least she's really dumb. I mean, Venezuela is below the equator. That Mexicans and blacks introduced cowboy culture. By the way, the worst of all was the easiest one, which was, will the Americans get involved? I think they said boots on the ground if, in fact, China invades Taiwan. The answer is yes. She couldn't figure it out. I mean, she
She said nothing for the better part of 2 minutes. Nothing.
Awful. That was so embarrassing. And she was getting kind of huge applause there. They loved her.
Yeah.
Because European socialists think that this little Marxist is a fantastic sign that America might finally see the light one day and join them in their doomed project.
Yeah.
And look, she was asked a couple of times, when you're president, and she never demurred. She just plowed along. This was part of her plan to run for president in 2028, and I think it's delicious. Please run her.
Yeah.
Please run Gavin Newsom, as Donald Trump now immortalised.
Yeah.